Hello, I'm Ryan, and this is a walkthrough of the Color Palette Pro, which is a color palette generator that I created to look like and interact like a synthesizer. In the top left corner, we get the name of the color. So this is Koopa Green Shell. And then we get the name of the palette, which is Brown Parakeet. So this is an analogous palette, which you can see down here, analogous as well as in the display, analogous. But of course, there's lots of different palette choices. So I could click on over to complementary, which is quite nice. Split complementary, triadic, tetradic, and then tints and shades. And for each of these palette types here, I also have the ability to try different variations. And so the different variations use different color theory to modify the palette slightly, depending on different kind of algorithmic rules, to produce some nice different variations. And this, of course, works for each of these different palettes, but you can just test it out and see what you like. It gives you a nice baseline. Included here, another method of kind of modifying the palette in place is the knobs. So like a true synthesizer, there's lots of little knobs that you can play with. And these modify, again, just according to different algorithms, slightly modifying the palettes. At any time, too, you can double click them to return everything to 0. All right, so in addition, coming back to the display up top here, we get the values for each of the different color spaces and formats. And one thing you can do is you can click on any of these to grab the CSS values so you can use it in your app or in your design or wherever you want to do that. It, of course, tells you that you're in palette mode. I'll talk about what that means in a second, but as well as, of course, the palette type and the variant. If you do the knobs, then it will tell you that they are effects enabled. All right, so with the palette types, we have the variants. You can also change different color spaces. So we're in OKLCH, that's the default, and that's the color space in which all of the different color calculations happen. And I'm relying there on a great library called Color.js. I'll link that below. But as you move the color space, you can see too that the sliders change. So, lab has this lightness AEB, so it changes so that they're compatible with that color space. So for instance, P3 operates in red, green, and blue. And so you can actually click down here to modify the colors in whatever color space you want to use. And then that shows you the current color, of course, here. And this as well is totally modifiable. So let's say I want to go down to something that's closer to red. I could put 10 there, click the play button, and then that will bring in chocolate chili and mandarin melon. So another way that you can bring in colors is with the eyedropper, and this will depend on your browser if it's supported or not, but you can click your eyedropper and move this anywhere on your desktop. So I'll come down here to this greenish color, bring that in. So now we have Mikado green and Panzer arousing. Cool palette. I do like this analogous here. Complementary, split, try, come back here. Very nice. All right, so that is how you can bring color in. You can also manipulate these values all together. Let me show you one thing here. So let's say we're in the OKLCH color space, and I just jack up the chroma here. One thing you'll notice is that in the display, this scissor icon illuminates, and that means that there's clipping going on. And that means that these color spaces, so sRGB, HSL, P3, can't accommodate this color. It exceeds the limits of their gamut in that it's going to just find the closest color that's possible. And so that's clipping, and that's what's happening. So you know that this color you'll have to be careful with if on displays that don't support this. So you can see down here that this is a display that doesn't support this. So this is a display that supports P3 up to the P3 color space, which translates to about 45% of human vision. By comparison, sRGB is only 35%, and then it can go up a little bit from there depending on how fancy your display is. And then this is also just a standard display. There's no HDR here, high dynamic range. This is just standard, but if you had HDR, that would show you HDR there. So it just kind of gives you a little indication of what your display is capable of. This will also depend on browser support and OS support and all that sort of stuff. But that gives you a lot of the kind of informational things about how to get color into the Color Palette Pro, and then also some of the informational things. One other quick tip with the display is that you can click on any of these swatches. If you're in OKLCH, that will copy that OKLCH color to the clipboard. And you can see that there's an indication down here that the color's been copied. So it's an easy way to get any of these colors if you bring them into a design. All right, let's move along to the information button. So you can click this in any palette and it will give you the name of that color as well as that color value. And again, of course, it's still clickable. So if you wanted to copy in this OKLCH, you could just copy there and bring it in. Likewise, like I said, you can copy here to get the hex value or here to get the OKLab value, et cetera, et cetera. You also have a list of all of your history up to 240 colors, and this is saved in your browser. So if you come back, you'll still have access to this. One of the nice things is that we have a lot of this purple color, so you can actually right-click on this to remove it from your color history. So if there's kind of maybe some different variations you're playing with in a color, you can remove those so there aren't duplicates. Or if there's a color you just really hate, like this red, you can remove it so it's out of your history. I will come back to these options in a second, but I'm going to move down to the different export options. So this is how you get it out of the Color Palette Pro. So the easiest way is just here to copy the link. So in the URL, it preserves all the state of the Color Palette Pro, including your color space, your palette type, your base color, your variant, and if you have any effects enabled. So you can just copy that URL and save it. You can share it, and it will always bring you to the color that you want, which is pretty cool. Additionally, you can also click the clipboard, which will copy some CSS variables of this palette to your clipboard. You can also download a CSS file of all of these CSS variables of these colors. So right now, because I'm in the analogous colors, I'm in the analogous palette type in the square variant, that's what it's going to download. Finally, and this is one of my favorite things to use, you can actually download an image of the color palette. So I'll bring that image in here. So it generates a PNG file of that palette, and it has the different colors here. So I'll often bring this into Figma and then just use the eyedropper to copy these colors. It works really nicely. It also includes a link, like I said, with all the data in that link, and you can actually open that then in the browser and go right back to this palette. And then just these two buttons down here, this one is just will generate a randomly curated color. So we have big yellow streak and greenish streak, lustrian undergrowth, Maya blue, air, river, and ball cold. Love it. And so these will give you some ideas. If you don't have a base color to work with, you can flip through these different pre kind of selected colors. And then there is also here a manual of all of the kind of parts of the Color Palette Pro. So you can, if you have questions about how any of it works, you can switch through that. But let's cover the last two parts of this, which are really cool that I haven't talked about yet. And that is the app button. And so this turns the Color Palette Pro into UI mode. And so what UI mode is it uses whatever kind of color palette is selected in the variant and generates a palette that can be used in your app. So let me generate an image of this, and then I will show you what I mean. All right, so this is Workout Moonlight. This is a light mode app. I'll talk about that in a second, but it generates your primary color, a on primary color. So the primary is like the surface, and then this would be a contrasted color to go on top of that. Then a primary container, on primary container. This language will be familiar if you've used Google's material design. It's similar to that or inspired by it. And then it has like the surface. So this would be the main background of your app. This would be your main text color. This would be a lighter text color, and then the different kind of surfaces that you could use. And this might be familiar if you've used things like Shad CN or Tailwind. They kind of sometimes use this sort of language of surface elevated, surface muted. Outline would be borders or things like that. And then there's also included an error color, a success color, and a warning color, which are all modifiable, which are all modified or adapted to your palette in question. So let me just show you another kind of color so you get a sense of this. And let's do kind of complementary. So we have Sky Dancer and Water Brown. I'll generate that image. So you can see here all the different colors that are selected with all the different surfaces that match. And then what you can do here is switch over to dark mode and generate the image. And this will actually generate all the same colors, but for a dark mode interface. So I'll bring this in. And so this is now blue dithered, but we have the primary color, and you can see it's been lightened, I believe, or maybe, no, it hasn't been lightened. The one before in the light mode was probably darkened to kind of have the right contrast. But now, so the surface is dark instead of light. Of course, the text is lighter, and all of these success and error things are all appropriate for a dark or light mode. So that is pretty cool. So you can have the dark mode or light mode enabled and then generate a UI palette based on the colors here. So that's a tour of the Color Palette Pro. This is totally free to use. You can just check it out on your browser. Let me know if you come up with any cool color palettes or run into problems. Yeah, there's not any ads or anything, so, have fun.